Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Converse with the Coach. Welcome and Happy New Year to everyone. It is so great to be with you today. My name is Mireille Karera, and I am your host of Converse with a Coach. In case you are joining us for the very first time, we have these episodes every Sunday at 6 p.m. Kigali time. We are broadcasting live from Rwanda, and Rwanda is on 6 p.m., 2 hours ahead of GMT. And if you are following us from outside of Rwanda and in Europe, we broadcast at 4 p.m. And if you're following us live from North America, we are live on at 11 a.m. time. Now, we're here for the first time. You may want to subscribe, and I'll tell you why. On this very channel, you will find a number of episodes that we have recorded back in 2020 or 2020. There will be at least 14 episodes for you to take a look at that we recorded in season 1 of Converse with a Coach. I'm sure there will be something there for you to be empowered and be lifted up before the week starts. Why do we have Converse with a Coach? It is because our intention, that of mine and the team at Karera Coaching Group, is really to be a platform of hope, a platform of exchange for all of us to gather on Sundays and get ready to start the week prepared. We host guests who are thought leaders, who are coaches like myself, to talk about issues that are very relevant to us right now. And if you are joining us for the second time, and I know some of you have been following us since the beginning, really, in August last year, I would like to once again thank you, and also thank you for being part of this journey on this second season of Converse with a Coach. I have listened, I have heard your comments and your feedback as to how this program has truly helped you to remain sharp, to have hope, and also get started on the right foot and on the right note on Mondays. So thank you, all of you who have been coming back on every Sunday. So thank you so much for being part of this journey. And if you've enjoyed this quite a lot, how about sharing this message? I think today's message is something that your friends, colleagues, or, people you like or don't like may want to hear. Today's topic is tapping into your potential and stepping into your greatness. Do you need permission to do that? That is the question that we will aim to answer today. Once again, before we start, click on the subscribe button that you see there, and also share with your friends and colleagues and people who truly need to hear this message about starting and being empowered with new beginnings, particularly for such a time as this in January in the midst of a pandemic. All right, so let's get into it. And I'm going to introduce our guest for today. And indeed, speaking of beginnings, it's the very first time, and that's the beginning of a brand new season, and also a brand new season that starts with something new we have not done on this platform, and that is hosting 2 guests at the same time. So today you are in it for a treat with 2 very special guests, and allow me to introduce them to you. My guests are Glen Sampson and Juanita Smith Sampson. They all have the same name because they are a couple, and they're husband and wife. They are joining us from South Africa. Hi, Glen. Hi, Juanita.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Welcome to Converse with a Coach.
Thank you so much. It's amazing to be here. It's really great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to have you on this show. And how is it going in South Africa?
At the moment, We've gone into level 3. I know it's different across the world. So the numbers have increased as far as the pandemic. We've got people that are still not sure about where this is going to go. Everybody now is waiting for the 15th of February, when after that we'll have the president speak again. At the moment, I think everybody's trying to be as optimistic as what they possibly can. And it's hard. Times are tough. There's uncertainty everywhere. People have lost their jobs throughout last year and still the beginning of this year. Everybody's hanging in there. I think that's where we are, the hanging in bit.
I understand. Yeah, and especially at the beginning of a new year, being in this situation is quite interesting, right? So we get into that in a moment, but just a little bit about Glen and Juanita. Glen is the executive head of business compliance and operations at Henley Business School, Africa, and the headquarters are in Johannesburg, South Africa. Glen is also a coach. So in addition to being head of operations for a business school, he's also an executive coach. So this conversation is certainly going to be very interesting with Glen as a coach. Now, Juanita is managing director of her own consulting company, which is Core Consult Group, I believe, right? Fantastic. Now, thank you again for being with us and sharing something that you believe will bring hope, particularly in a situation that you've just described, Juanita. Now, on this show, I have a tradition, and the tradition is for my guests to share with our audience how we met. Do you remember, Glen and Juanita, how we met?
Yeah, indeed. This must have been probably almost 4 years ago. I was in fact new to the business school, and we were invited to attend a Pan-African trade conversation at a venue out in Johannesburg. And one of the speakers, we were introduced by a lady called Lebogang Chaka, who's very influential in Pan-African trade in Africa. And one of her guest speakers was a really, really amazing breath of fresh air called Mireille. And from there, in fact, at the point in time, and I'll let Juanita continue, Juanita was looking for someone to do some coaching with her. And when we sat and listened to you, Juanita sort of pinched me and said, I think I found my coach. And that's how the relationship started.
Yeah, I like telling my side of the story to this. That's because obviously I was with Glen at the same meeting. And months before that, I had been looking for a coach. And I was convinced that I wasn't going to find somebody that connected with me and shared the same energy. And Glen said to me, don't worry, the time will come, you will find this person. And I said to him, I've seen so many people out there and I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. I don't think I'm a good candidate for any coach. That's what I thought. And then we listened to how you were speaking. And I actually said to Glen, now that's the energy. Because I'm all about energy, right? I need to feel that this is the right person, everything. And as we were driving home, I said to Glen, I think I found the person. And I think from there, it was amazing because our journey began. And it began for me to find somebody that I connected with, for somebody that I could begin a new journey on. So I was really grateful for getting to the Pan-African conference, more so getting to meet somebody that I was actually going to build a relationship with, which was you.
Yeah, indeed. My goodness. Isn't it amazing how with couples, the husband has a story and the wife has another side of a story. I love the compliment, how you truly complement each other. And thank you for sharing with our audience the story. And indeed, I do remember you being part of the conference where I was invited to talk in Johannesburg back in 2017 on actually on Rwanda. I was invited to talk about how Rwanda is doing in the investment climate, and you were amongst the audience, and how we've remained in touch and connected, and obviously Juanita through the coaching sessions. I was amazed by you know, how you have evolved. I must commend both of you. When we reconnected later last year, you have grown, obviously, as professionals and leaders in your field. And to me, as a coach, executive coach, it's a joy to see that professionals who are seasoned and have been around for a long time have that appetite to continue to grow. And you certainly exemplify that and embody that. So I wish more leaders in South Africa, in Rwanda, can really be like you and continue on that path of leadership development.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. So now that we have introduced you and briefly talked about the topic, I think it is important that we put that into context a little bit. And I'm going to have you share, and you'll have the full flow to really give us the perspective on this topic. Now, why the topic? The topic, I believe, is very pertinent because we are starting a new year. And with the new year, it's the first time that we start a brand new year all over the world with the pandemic in mind, with some countries being in full lockdown, like we are in Rwanda. And some of you who have followed before, you can see that the background is different. So that's because Rwanda is in full lockdown. So I am in my home studio or improviser home studio. So some countries are starting a year really unlike how it was planned before. And it's a new thing. It can be daunting. Beginnings, as we know, are naturally difficult. Now, adding on top the pandemic is another dimension. When I was sharing with Glen and Juanita, I was so amazed by a perspective that they brought to the table and the perspective they shared with me about people having the right to begin doing something great, tapping into your potential, if you give yourself permission to do that. I thought, that's quite an interesting perspective. So what is meant by being given permission to do that? Are you being given a permission, or do you give yourself permission to be who you know you can be for yourself, for your environment, and the world around us? So one thing led to another, and here we are. They were very, very generous and willing to share their journey about their start and getting to the leaders that they are right now. So that is the context. And today, the end goal is for all of you to walk out of this episode feeling empowered, knowing that you have the permission to be who you want to be. So when we get there, let me now ask Glen the topic. I know that this is very close to you. What does it mean for you to tap into your potential and step into your greatness? Do you need permission, or go ahead?
Thanks so much. Yes, indeed, a topic very close to my heart. I think, again, you mentioned it previously, context is important. And so when we speak about humble beginnings, all of us have stories to tell about where we started out. And for Juanita and myself and many others that came out of our same sort of socioeconomic context, beginnings were humble. We didn't have much. We came from a socio-political context that wanted to barrier us from having much. And so the issue around permission, I think, flowed with me throughout my life. And having had the conversation with you, I really did a lot of reflection on this issue around permission, right? And permission is a construct. It's a construct that we've grown up with. It's a construct that society has put on themselves, and for very good reason. So permission giving and asking permission is not a bad thing, right? We are brought up as children to ask permission for certain things. I want a cookie. I ask mom and dad for permission. When I'm at school and I want to do something, I want to leave the classroom, I asked the teacher for permission. And as we go through life, we ask permission for things, even in the workplace. We want to do a project. We want to do something that's out of our scope of work. We go to the boss and we ask permission. If I want to have a leave of absence, I ask for permission for that. And so the positive of that is that it creates a sense of order, a sense of discipline. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The downside of having to ask permission for your own potential, I think, is where this downside comes in. And again, when I talk about our humble beginnings, the social construct set to us as children, as people in a community, as people of color within in a certain racial context and political context, that we were bound to ask for permission to do pretty much anything throughout our lives. And the system at the time wanted to remove as many of those permissions to be free, to be yourself, to step into who you could potentially be because of the thoughts at the time, right? And then having gone through your life with these voices, I guess is the best way to describe it. You second guess your potential all the time. And, you know, long story short, coming into my professional career, it was something that I think for a long time on reflection held me back from really being the best that I could be in a given situation. I always thought to myself, you know, that promotion, was it really me? Was it luck? Was it just being in the right place at the right time? You know, was it the mentor? Was it a boss? Surely it couldn't have just been my own energy, my own potential. And right up until pretty much, I think probably about a year ago, this thing haunted me, that I needed permission because it was never about my potential that got me to a place of leadership. It was always an external factor. It was always somebody else or something else or luck or some divine intervention that got me to a place. And I had many conversations and reflected deeply, consulted quite widely with many people, especially at Henley. And I was told by so many people, well, actually, I think it's time that you give yourself permission to be who we know you can be. And that was an interesting thing, and led to even deeper reflection, having coaching conversations with people in my circle to say, yeah, absolutely. Do you realize that by giving yourself permission to be the best of who you can be, firstly, you liberate yourself out of these absolute mental chains. That's the first thing, right? What you then do is you unleash, what I believe is the limitless potential, right? And so that is this issue around permission for me, right? And I'll let Juanita tell her own story.
Indeed. Before Juanita does, let me just maybe unpack what you just said, because you said incredibly important things there that people may have missed, particularly those who don't know the context of the country and the communities you are part of. So for someone following us from maybe Europe and Canada or North America, where we have a lot of viewers, this may not be even a topic at all, because, you know, people are free, they have the permission to do whatever they want to do. But I believe that it makes sense that we kind of go back a little bit, and then Juanita will come back and share. So clearly, with the historical context of South Africa, with the racial divide, clearly what the history has impacted you, from what I understand. It has impacted you in the sense that, you know, the freedom that one is supposed to be born with was not there, and it has led to a certain set of behaviors that have now affected you in your choices, in your decisions, and also in your leadership journey as a professional, because you know, of that background that you come from. And it's only recently that you have realized that, you know what, there might be some residual or unresolved matters that are there for you not to truly believe that your achievements are yours. rather than luck or divine coincidence, which but it's only recently, a year ago, that you realized that you don't need permission, just be who you can be. So that's what I gather, and I felt that I needed to unpack for our audience that may not be familiar with the ecosystem or the history in South Africa. And it's just amazing to hear that. Let me just get Juanita's take on that, because both of you have the same background. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So we grew up in a colored community in the Western Cape. And I grew up in an area called Athlone, and more or less on the Cape Flats, and an area called Bridgetown. So when you're growing up in an area that, and we were poor, we grew up poor. But when you grow up in a community that's poor, you don't realize you're poor because everyone around you is poor. So you don't realize it. You know, you don't see poverty. Everybody else is doing the same thing you're doing. Everybody's borrowing the same amount of items. And I only realized how poor we were when I went to high school. And I went to high school in a different area. And then I realized, oh my gosh, we were poor, right? And then these things they stand out, right? And then you start seeing the differences. But growing up was actually okay, right? There was nobody better off or less than you around you. So things were actually very fine. And then you got to a point as you were growing up and you realized that when it comes to permission that Glen was mentioning, you needed to be humble. But humility came with a different type of humbleness, right? You need to be humble about what you achieved. Don't compliment yourself. Others must compliment you. You know, it was that. You mustn't talk about yourself. Let others talk about yourself. And the more you raise people up with that type of upbringing, the less people speak about themselves, the less they have confidence. Every time they think that they need to only get acknowledgement by a superior, a boss, so they keep on stepping back, and you don't realize what you do to an entire community when you raise them that way and say to them, so there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and you know that's something else. When you say to somebody, don't talk about yourself, don't talk about your achievements, don't come home and brag, you know, so you were never talking about yourself. So you always needed some sort of permission to speak about yourself. And it was only when somebody else spoke about you. And what you don't realize you do to people when you do that is, and I only realized that later in life, is that you keep on stepping back and you keep on moving into the shadows, and you don't talk about yourself and you don't talk about your achievements, because that's how you were raised, because you must be humble. Nobody talks about you. Everybody else must talk about you. You mustn't talk about yourself. And then we had this entire generation where people never spoke about themselves, where people never stepped up to the plate, where people waited until a boss or a superior noticed how good they were before they stepped up. So that's what you did. So there was a generation that was waiting to be acknowledged because they were raised thinking that they needed to be acknowledged and get permission to speak about themselves. And you know, it goes about compliments also. I think I was in my late 20s when I realized how to accept compliments. So when somebody said how nice, oh, you've got something, I would justify it. Oh, you know, I bought it there. That's where I bought. So it was never about saying thank you, because you couldn't say thank you, because thank you meant, oh my God, who do you think you are to think that you can just accept a compliment? You needed to justify everything because you needed permission. And that's what we did. And then you found people in their cities now starting to say thank you to compliments, or just letting it go. Somebody said something nice about you and it was okay. You didn't need to justify, oh, you know, but I did this because I studied for 3 hours and, you know, you don't understand them. All of that now you need to unlearn and unpack in your own journey at your own time.
Yeah, That's really good. My goodness. You know, Juanita, as you speak, I'm really thinking that this conversation is going to benefit a lot of people, because this is a conversation that needs to be had not only nationally in your country, but also on the African continent. I think, you know, that there is a word that keeps coming to my mind, which is a psychological term. It's called PTSD, right? Post-traumatic syndrome, meaning that, you know, when you are used to something, there are some effects which may be underlining below the surface that kind of gets triggered at some point, but that's on the negative side of things. But what I realized now is that you are able to identify behaviors that are stemming from that socioeconomic construct that Glen was referring to. So really, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your stories that are certainly going to help. But before we get into more, I see there's a lot of people that have just joined. So if you've just joined and you are following us live, please feel free to ask questions or share comments or share your experience with Glen and Juanita and everybody else. So you see me look at my phone. This is an interactive session. I would like really your views and also your questions if you have experienced something similar to our guest today. And remember what I said at the beginning of this program. This is not just for entertainment. This is not just a program that we do, but it's really for you to be empowered, for you to start a week and to start a year uplifted and ready to become the winner, become the best you that you can be. So if you need any questions asked or any comments, feel free to do that. Oh, I see someone already commenting. That is Jeanette. Hi, Jeanette, and Happy New Year. Jeanette is from Rwanda. She says, sometimes you think that he who gives himself permission to talk about himself is arrogant. So I think Jeanette was commenting to what Juanita was saying. Thank you, Jeanette. And I'm inviting everybody else to do the same. Share your questions, your experience, or similar things. Now, unpacking a little bit what Juanita just said, and obviously going back to you, Juanita and Glen. So you shared your story from slightly a different perspective than Glen. So Glen realized only last year through coaching, through speaking to professionals, that he doesn't give himself permission to do that. So that's where the light bulb went off. So the eureka, the transformation moment that, you know, in coaching we talk about. What about you, Juanita? When did you realize that the social construct that were there during the apartheid have had that kind of impact on you? And when did you realize that you needed to change the course?
So I think my realization came about in a different way to Glen. And mine was because of being a woman in the workplace. Because being a woman in the workplace is very different to being a male in the workplace and the permissions that are granted to men versus permissions that are granted to women. You know, and without going into feminism and all those things, I wanted to say that, so as a woman, your journey probably would have started earlier, because there are many things allowed in the workplace as far as comments, as far as advancements, and then we're going to go into equality, that are allowed in the workplace, which are easier for men than what they are for women. And for a woman, it becomes harder for her to step into a role where she can say, I can just do this, and I am able to do this, and I don't need this permission, because you realize you're very much aware of the environment that you're working in. And given the industry, so I've always worked in male-dominated industry, it makes it even harder. So my realization, I would say, came much earlier than Glen's, because he's not that I'm saying that he might have been more comfortable than mine, but mine was a more difficult road, being a woman and getting permission and having the confidence to do what I wanted to do, because the opportunities were so few and far between. So when it comes to permission and it comes to being able to give yourself permission, it goes with the opportunities that you are given. And as women, those opportunities didn't come easy. So that's why I'm saying I think mine came quite much earlier than what Glen's did.
And I'm also thinking, and obviously making assumptions, that also because you are in HR, human resources, and you are in the field of behavior and psychology and training and coaching, that is something that will come a little bit sooner than that. Wonderful. Let me go back to Glen, and I'm really loving this episode because I've got the male perspective and the female perspective, which is a first. It's a fantastic beginning. As I was listening to Juanita, I was thinking, maybe in the next editions we certainly need to have that dynamic continue. Glen,
yeah.
Thank you again for sharing your personal experience and how coaching unlocked that, and obviously a number of other things. So now I'm bringing back to the topic and the general audience and the time in the season we are in right now, January. Tapping into your experience, building up on your own personal journey, what would you say were your practical, conscious actions and behaviors for you to give yourself permission to be great, to tap into your potential, that you really people can glean from your experience?
Thanks, Mireille. Practically, and I don't say this because I'm a coach, but coaching was a massive gateway to actually firstly being able to reflect on, why am I holding myself back? Why do I think that I need permission, right? And what are the things that I'm now going to do, having said, well, okay, so let's get beyond that now. So let's say you don't need the permission to step into your potential. How do you actually do that? And one of the things that I practically did was I went back and looked at my career and said, okay, so let's take a timeline of the careers you've had, the jobs the roles you've had, and go and take stock of what are the skills and abilities that each one of those roles taught you, that you learned in those roles, and that you then manifested to get to the next place. And when you take it and you look at it role for role, and I've been really, really fortunate, and I won't say lucky, I've been fortunate to have really good mentors and have opportunities that I've taken and taken those opportunities to get to a new role and to go for those promotions. What you look back on is you realize you've got such a rich sort of bag of ability and skill that I think it's an indictment not to firstly share with those that you're put in a managerial position to guide and to grow. So that's one of the things, right? And then the other thing, again, in conversations with coaches, one of the big conversations that really had this Damascus moment, the lights came on. It was about saying, so when you are sharing your story and not asking for permission to share that story, you don't realize that sometimes you become the role model for someone else to say, well, if they could do it, surely I could do it as well, right? And I think that for me was really impactful. That for me said, well, actually, maybe your sharing and your vulnerability allows somebody else to step into their own potential and greatness. And that's one of the legacy pieces for what I want to achieve in my life. It's one of the purpose achievements that I'm looking to do as I continue through this journey of life. And so for me, that is really, really important.
What I heard is really that coaching is one of the platforms that allow you to discover yourself and believe in yourself. Self-discovery is certainly one of the things that is of coaching, among other things as well.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Juanita, what would you say practically was something that helped you believe in yourself to give yourself permission to be great.
What the practical things that you did to allow yourself to step into your potential?
Oh, sorry, Mireille. Sorry, I just lost connection there, so I didn't hear what you said. I think I took time out, right, to actually firstly find myself. And it seems as if that's such a far-fetched idea, but I actually needed to first find out what I wanted to do, what I enjoyed doing, and to give myself that permission to carry on. So I would take moments out and I would think to myself, okay, this is what I've done. This is what I've achieved. Do I think that I am worthy? And at that stage, it was maybe the wrong terminology to use, because I used things like worthy. I was putting myself up against men that had the same qualifications or less than mine. And then I realized that, no, but why must I do the worthy part? Why must I keep on proving my self-worth when I've already made my mark? I've made my mark in the business. I've shown what I was able to do. So it was the little things. I stopped measuring myself against the male counterparts. I went with what I achieved. I went with what the information that I got back from people and feedback. And that to me was how I grew into the fact that I could give myself permission to move on to the next thing. Because if I kept on going about the fact that I wasn't earning the same salary as what they did, I wasn't getting the same recognition, I would actually be holding myself back. So I needed to do something different for myself at the time where I knew that equality wasn't priority in organizations, and move on. Otherwise, being stuck in that rut would actually have kept me back. And it was little things that I did for myself. And then later on, when you speak about self-introspect and looking inside, so being married to a coach is not easy, right? Because they use this terminology like self-introspect, and you think to yourself, I should be doing this because this is the terminology that they use and things like, and I'm thinking to myself, what is this man self-introspect, this and that? Self-introspect was not easy for me. It didn't come easy, because as I went into self-introspect or what I thought about self-introspect, my self-introspect became me comparing myself once again to what others were doing. And I went down this rabbit hole. And once you go down that hole, it's very hard, because you kind of lose track of where you're going as far as what the self-introspect should do. And my self-introspect became a fact of I used to compare myself with what other people were doing. And I found that I did it 5 years later. I went back to what I was doing 5 years before. It became once again this comparison, right? And then I learned that self-introspect could be very harming if you didn't know how to go about it, because you're now trying to go and find yourself, because the coach is saying go self-introspect. But if you don't know how to do it, you can actually do a lot of harm, because you start comparing yourself, and you start comparing yourself as to what your potential is and what once again, your greatness is compared to theirs. That's not where you should be going, and that's why I'm saying when I went through the permission stage, self-introspect, I did it at the wrong time. I did it when I didn't understand how to do it. And that became a problem for me.
Right. I see. And I agree with what you just said, Juanita, is that we lose confidence and we don't give ourselves permission to be great when we compare our journey with the journey of other people that we see. And we really see only one part of who they are. It's, like the iceberg, we maybe see 10%, but we don't know the 90% that they also go through, like all of us. So I like how you say that not comparing yourself really gave you that permission to be you 100% and self-introspect, which I'm sure, as being next to a coach was not easy at first, because it's always painful to look within, right? Yeah. So let me invite our audience to ask questions if they have any specific questions. I see there's quite a few more people that have joined. If this is really resonating with you, please ask any specific question that my colleagues and also guests will be able to answer for you. Now, we started off this program having the socio-economic fabric or construct as really the basis of all of this. That is the root cause of it. So what we shared was the effect it had on you and how you had to undo all of that. Yeah. I like what Glen said, and I'm going to ask you, Glen, first to answer this. So imagine that there are people who have had the same background, let's say, who were from the same cultural background in the Western Cape or other places where they still feel that they don't have that permission. What would you say to them as a mentor, as someone who has now gone through the other side and you now speak with authority into that topic? What would you say to those who are still where you were before?
Thanks, Mireille. And I think yes, I spoke about the socioeconomic context as a context, right? And I wanted to make a further point that sometimes not everybody comes from the same socioeconomic context, but still suffer with the imposter syndrome that they feel they need to give themselves permission. So I don't want to almost constrain the fact that people deal with this issue to a certain socioeconomic context, because I think it's in my context, it's a continental context. I think it's a global context, right? For a lot of people that they might not have come from similar backgrounds, but people struggle with these things around not being able to have permission to step into their potential. They struggle with, and there's lots of really good research on this phenomenon called the imposter syndrome, right? Where they believe that their potential and where they are in their success is a matter of fluke. It's a matter of luck. It's not, right? And so back to the question around, so somebody else in a similar sort of context, wherever they might be, whether in the Western Cape, in South Africa, or the world, right? What could they potentially do? How do they take some practical steps to move through that process? And I think I have to reflect on my own journey, and it's to say the first thing is you need to be able to have conversations outside of your own context, right? Because often if you only have conversations within the same context, you're going to hear all the same stuff, right? So give yourself permission to break out of the circle of where these messages are swirling about, right? Because you open yourself up to new energy coming in, new information, new practical tips, tricks, methods to be able to take the next step, right? Talk to, you said it yourself, talk to mentors, right? Coaching, mentoring is a huge empowerment tool to help you move through that process, because it's a really scary process for a lot of us, right? Because you've had all of these messages, often you need somebody to stand alongside you and say, okay, let's do this thing, right? And so I'm not going to do it for you. I'm going to prompt you. I'm going to ask some questions. I might give you some guidance and advice, but I'm going to be one step behind you when you take that step to the next place, right? And mentors are not necessarily only in the workplace. They could be in your community. They could be in a friendship circle. They could be in places that you wouldn't even have thought about finding mentors, right? So open your eyes up to new connections, to new conversations, right? And even if it's just upfront, because it's that scary, just to observe, just to think about it and think, well, if it's good for me, do I need permission? Well, pretty much not, right? So let me take that step, right? What could I lose, right? And I might not lose anything, but what could I gain? Well, hey, now that starts becoming really, really interesting. And so I think I think the journey starts with some small practical steps, but I think it is about breaking out and having different conversations. And again, I've been fortunate to be exposed, but also given myself permission to take the step into new places, new conversations, new spaces where I wouldn't have thought about it before. But you know what? You lose nothing by sticking your hand up and saying, "Hi, I'm Glen. I'd love to understand where you come from," right? And I think that's where it started, yeah.
Absolutely. And what I like about what you just said is that you don't have anything to lose when you are opening yourself up to new environments, you're exposed to new things. Clearly there is growth. And thank you for also sharing that this is not just for a specific historical socioeconomic construct, but it's an issue that will be and can be faced anywhere in the world. I really like that. And thank you for the tips that you just shared, really, about one, exposure, diversity, and also having a mentor, having someone walk with you so that you overcome those internal barriers, which you said about the imposter syndrome. And indeed, those of you watching us, I would highly recommend to do some research on the imposter syndrome, which is the internal barriers, the self-limiting beliefs that we have generally for us not to tap into the amazing wealth of potential that we come to this world with. So thank you for that. Let me now ask Juanita, any tips, recommendations, or advice for people who are facing the same issues that you may have faced?
So I'm going to agree with what Glen said about how you need to reach out. And to me, allyship is important, right? Surround yourself with people that are going to uplift you. And once again, it doesn't need to be people in your workplace. It doesn't need to be people in your community. Surround yourself, and it's little things. I always say to people, surround yourself with people that don't talk over you, that give you the space to talk and express yourself. Because once you do that, they've given you the permission to show who you are and to be who you are. Surround yourself with people that will support you. Surround yourself with people, and it doesn't have to be people that share your same views. It doesn't have to, but surround yourself with people that share different views with you to help you to understand, to grow, to get perspective, because with that comes a different form of permission, a different form of growth. So the allyship around this whole thing is very important. Don't retract. Don't think that you can do this on your own. This is not what it is about, right? This journey of giving yourself permission, this journey of thinking that you need to do this alone, that only you can step into your greatness or give yourself permission, it comes with a combination of things. Surround yourself with people that allow you and give you the space and the freedom to do so. Because then you grow as you step into your greatness. Then you grow as you give yourself your first permission. You grow and you give yourself the second permission. So I would say the allyship around this is very important.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I'm seeing a comment, and that's from Jonas Shama. Hi, Jonas. Thank you very much for your comment. Jonas says, I like the advice of not comparing. Rather than asking me, audience, to ask a question, let me ask you a question, all of you following us live now. Share with us, share with Juanita and Glen, what was your takeaway, or what is your takeaway message from this specific edition that you are following? Is there one thing that kind of say, this is what I need to do, this is what I don't need to do anymore? Just like what Jonas shared a moment ago. Please do share a comment, and then I'll give that feedback to our guest today. Now, we talked, the hindrances, the external barriers, the external factors that allow us to think that we cannot do or be who we want to be. We also talked about the imposter syndromes, and we talked about two things, mentors and coaches. But before you even go there, there has to be some kind of routine. There has got to be some kind of structure one can put in place to give yourself permission on an ongoing basis. Do you have any, or do you agree that you need to continuously do something that will help you to remember that, you know what, I am no longer that, I give myself permission to do and be this and that? Glen, would you like to say something?
Yeah, and thanks, Mireille. Look, we're all a work in progress. That's the first thing, right? And then I'm going to make the analogy of wanting to be fitter or lose weight or one of those goals. So set yourself a goal, right? You don't. Somebody said to me a while back when I wanted to get into being a little bit more fit. You don't think yourself fit. You've got to do something, right? So yes, setting goals is really important, and start with small goals. And how do I possibly set goals that I'm going to hold myself accountable for? Well, again, in the world of coaching, we talk about personal journaling, right? Because you need to hold yourself accountable. So start with a practice, with a habit of getting a journal, putting it down somewhere, putting your thoughts down, recording to say, I'm going to start giving myself small permissions today, right? And at the end of the day or the end of the week, reflect back on that and say, so if I think back, how many times this week did I either ask for permission where on retrospect I didn't need to, or on the other side of that, how many times this week did I give myself permission to do something that grew me or helped somebody else? And I think that becomes a habit. And before you know it, we talk about unconscious competence. I don't know what I know. It simply becomes part of who you are. You're giving yourself those permissions without even thinking about it, right? But it starts with making a choice, setting a goal, and then repeating that process so that it becomes a habit. That would be my tip. Yeah.
That is great. Thank you. Let's hear from Juanita. Any structure, any practical tips that will help people, maintain that?
So for me, starting your own business is not easy. Nobody prepares you for when you start your own business. Nobody prepares you that you're not going to get funding the next day, the next month, the next year. Nobody prepares you for the fact that you're going to have people that don't pay you on time, that business is not going to come easy. And nobody prepares you for failure. And what you need to do is you need to give yourself permission to fail. Give yourself permission to grow from the experiences. So I'm not saying that every time you fail, you say to yourself, oh, that's just part of my journey. I'm just going to keep on failing. It's okay. I'm saying give yourself permission for when you make a mistake, or when you don't close the deal, or when the proposal doesn't hit the right spot, or when you don't land that client. Give yourself the permission to grow from that so that you know what to do, not better, what to do differently. And that's what you need to do. We need to cut ourselves some slack, because we're fighting against this monster that's non-existent at times, where we think that we keep on having to be the best. We keep on having to hit the ball out of the park. And it's not true. You need to give yourself permission to fail. Give yourself permission to lose the client. Give yourself permission to let that client go. To choose the client that you want must be part of your business. Give yourself all those permissions, right, of letting go, and it's not a bad thing, of failing, and it's not a bad thing. That's what we need to do.
Absolutely. And oh my goodness, as you were speaking, I sort of visualized my journey as an entrepreneur now, 6 years into it. And even before jumping and leaving security of employment and starting a new organization, I know that I can certainly relate to those fears, to those negative thoughts or imposters that were saying, you cannot be an African or Rwandan coach in Rwanda who was not American, because people are used to Western, or were used to Western coaches coming to Rwanda and coaches. So for me, I had to fight quite a lot of saboteurs. We call them saboteurs at our coaching academy. So I had to fight a lot of saboteur voices or imposter voices or negative self-talk to believe that I too can do what anyone can do, whether it's from the West or East or South, etc. And also sometimes those imposter can be external voices, our surrounding. So up until now, we focused on internal permission that we give ourselves, but sometimes they can be, choked to some extent by the external voices of people that feed us with negativity or their own fears that are projected to us, and we end up believing their fears. So Juanita, as you were speaking, really, it brought me back to the early days of you finding out how to become an entrepreneur, how to do things right, starting a company. And that I see as a big thing, particularly with the pandemic, back to the circumstances where many people are let go of, many lost their jobs all around the world, millions of people lost jobs. So clearly those negative voices or the sense of not having permission to start again in a different industry, to start again in a different area could be there. So I think this conversation and what you just shared should really give people hope to try something new, give themselves permission to do what they maybe wanted to do before, but never got a chance to do that. So I hope that all of you watching us are feeling that excitement and empowerment for you to give yourself permission to start again. There is no such a thing as a failing, because when you do something that doesn't work out now, it can work out as one of the best things for you in future. And even if it looks like it's a short-term loss, but that is a long-term gain. Wonderful. So I see we've got 3 minutes to go. I will comment on what Jeanette said, and I'm going to give you, each one of you, 1 minute to give us closing remarks. So I see Jeanette saying, interesting idea, expanding my discussion and network, and connection is my takeaway. Thank you, Jeanette, for sharing your takeaway. Great. If there's anyone following us now wishing to share your takeaway, please continue to do that. We've got less than 3 minutes to go. Now, lastly, Glen and Juanita, you've got 1 minute to share with us your last remarks and how people can be in touch with you should they really want to know more about what you do and how potentially you can help them overcome those limiting beliefs.
Fantastic. Okay. I'm going to let Juanita start this time around.
Okay, no problem. I think we've given our contact details. I'm not sure, Mireille, you've got our links to Twitter and to our email addresses. You're welcome to contact us. By profession, I work in different corporations and I work on diversity. I work on inclusivity, working with humans in the system. I'm very passionate about it. I don't believe no organization or system can operate without the humans in the system and taking that into account. So please connect with me on Twitter. I'm very, very much involved with Twitter, and I like following everybody else once I get to know you. So please feel free to do so.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
And so for me, I think my takeaway, I'm on LinkedIn. Go and find me. You can't miss this space. I'm less active on Twitter, but I am there under Henley SA Talent. I think my takeaway is I'm really encouraged, as much as we're going through a pandemic, as much as we're going through really tough times globally, I'm really encouraged by looking to the youth. I watch the youth, and pretty much almost every person on this planet has a cell phone, right? and they are connected to the world. You want encouragement? Go and look to the youth, because one thing about the youth that I'm starting to notice is they very rarely ask for permission nowadays, right? They do their thing. They are really stepping into what they believe is their own greatness. I was absolutely amazed and humbled by Amanda Gorman at the inauguration, right? So there's an example of someone not asking permission and stepping into her own greatness. And she is one of millions. And in Africa, it's time we start stepping into our own stories. Yeah.
That's right. We all know our story. That's so beautiful to talk about the youth transforming lives and also not needing permission. I love how the future generations are always better than the previous ones. So that leads me quite nicely to complete this episode by sharing with you now, following us, that next Sunday, same time, we will be joined by two young ladies who are captains of their industries. They took matters into their hands by being the pioneers and leaders of the shoemaking industry in Rwanda. So next Sunday, I will be joined by Kevin Kagirimhondu and Isolde Shimwe, who are co-founders of Uzuri KY Limited, which is Rwanda's leading organization that manufactures shoes. I'm inviting you, all of you, to join us back next Sunday, next same time, to hear about how they took matters into their hands and they're now leading their own organization and now leading an entire industry of an entire nation and training others to do the same. So thank you all for joining us. Remember, do subscribe to this channel. And if you need to hear more about coaching and how our organization, Karera Coaching Group, can help you, feel free to go to karera-coaching.com. I will see you next week. Have a wonderful Sunday. Stay safe and stay empowered. See you
Thanks
soon.
So much.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Glen and Juanita.
Thanks to Cora and Mireille. Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers.